As you can hear, the A and G strings are buzzing horribly when played open. However, they have plenty of clearance over the first fret, so the buzz is not a result of the nut slots being too low and the open strings buzzing against the first fret. The nut slots being too wide and not being ramped down properly at the back is the real culprit. And fixing the real problem allowed me to take the A and G strings, which were buzzing horribly at 25 thousandths action at the first fret, down to about 22 thousandths and 20 thousandths action at the first fret, respectively, with absolutely no buzz at all. I filled the slots with baking soda and superglue the same way I did in my baking soda and superglue nut slot filling video from 2022, which I've linked in the description box. Simply fill the slot with baking soda, level it with your finger, then hold your finger over the slot and blow on it to clear up any baking soda that isn't in the slot. Apply some thin superglue and it'll cure almost immediately. Just be sure to fill the slot completely. The string is buzzing in the nut itself because the walls on either side of the string are too wide. Everything has to be filled in 100% with a brand new slot cut completely from scratch to guarantee that the entire slot is the correct width. After filling the slots, I then recut the slots with appropriate sized nut slotting files. For the 85 thousandths diameter A string, I used an 85 thousandths nut file. Perfect. For the 45 thousandths diameter G string, I used a 46 thousandths nut file. Listen to that. That did it. For high E guitar strings that are dead sounding when played open, or making a sitar sort of buzzing sound, this 10 thousandths StewMac pull stroke gauged saw has worked miracles. Using a 10 thousandths nut file often has not done the trick for me for whatever reason, but where the nut file failed, the razor saw succeeded. Zona also makes ultra-fine razor saws of an even finer size, with some models having many more teeth per inch for a smoother cut than the StewMac. I've purchased two of them that are great matches for guitar B and high E strings, but haven't yet had a chance to try them on any troublesome nut slots. All I can say is that this StewMac saw has been a lifesaver multiple times, and has made dead, muted, or buzzy open high E strings sound crystal clear again, with just a couple quick cuts. Many times I haven't even needed to fill the nut slot first, as long as the string had enough height at the first fret to come down in the nut slot a fair amount. Proper ramping of the slot is also critical, no matter what size nut file you're using. Instead of just filing the entire slot parallel to the fingerboard, angle the file downward as you file the back half of the slot to create a ramp. The typical angle recommended is about 15 degrees. Not angling the file down and creating a ramp can not only result in tonal issues, but intonation issues as well. So if you're getting unexplained buzzing or even a dead or muted sound on your open strings, and you've verified that the strings aren't too low in the slot, try filling them and then recutting them with a proper ramp on the back half of the slot. So as for the lowest reasonable action at the first fret, a general rule of thumb for bass guitars would be about 22 thousandths on the E and A strings and about 20 thousandths on the D and G strings. And in my experience on electric guitar, I'd say about 15 to 18 thousandths on the wound strings and about 10 to 12 thousandths on the plain strings. Also keep in mind that this is going to vary based on round wound strings versus flat wound strings, and string gauge, tuning, and scale length, which is going to affect the tension of the strings in pounds. But as a general ballpark figure, those are the numbers I go by. I exclusively use a digital action gauge for taking those measurements, and I very highly recommend using one to do that. And the one I get is from G-Tech Guitars on eBay. I also have his digital neck relief gauge, so that's also an excellent tool. And on that note, the neck relief is always the first step in any setup that I do. So I like to set the neck either straight, meaning 0 relief, or 2 thousandths to 3 thousandths of relief. Then I put a capo at the first fret to take the nut out of the equation, set the action to the desired preference at the 17th fret on all strings individually. I don't mess around with radius gauges, I just go each string one at a time. Then take the capo off, and then you adjust your first fret action via the nut slots. And generally, you want to get the first fret action as low as you can without any buzzing at all. And it's critical to mention that your first fret action is tremendously affected by your neck relief. So by setting the neck straight or with minimal relief first, and setting your 12th or 17th fret action to where you want it, you're guaranteeing that you're not going to cut the nut slots too low. So as a real-world example, I was working on a Strat the other day, and I noticed the first fret action was crazy high, and I'm like, okay, bringing that down, I know this is going to feel way better. But instead of touching the nut slots at all, I then measured the relief and found out it was at about 28 thousandths of relief at the 7th fret, which is like gigantic. And sure enough, tightening the truss rod and getting the neck dead straight, some of the strings were actually touching the first fret and fretting out completely. And then I had to go in with my Music City Bridge nut rescue powder, fill this in some super glue, and fill those slots and recut them to get them to the proper first fret action. So the moral of the story is to avoid cutting the nut slots too low. Get your setup dialed in first. You can always add more relief, and that's going to bring your first fret action up a bit, and then you can always cut the nut slots down a little bit more. But if you go too far, you're going to have to end up filling them and recutting them. And in the context of this video, like correcting buzzing on the open strings, that is not the result of the action at the first fret being too low. So the strings aren't buzzing against the fret, they're buzzing because the slot is too wide. You're already going to have to fill the slot and recut it, so the last thing you want to run into is doing that while your setup is not adjusted the way it should be, and then realizing that later. So now you've gone through all that work of filling the nut slot, recutting it, you've corrected the buzz from the nut slot that was cut improperly, but then you're like, man, this doesn't feel so great to play, I don't know what's going on with that, and you discover later that you've got too much relief in your neck, and the action's higher than you want it. You straighten the neck out, you lower the action, and now that nut slot that you just filled is buzzing against the first fret. So now the nut slot is fine, but now it's just way too low, and now it actually is buzzing against the first fret, and now you've got to fill it and recut it all over again. Oh, and just as one final note, if you want to maintain the same spacing, because once you fill the entire slot completely, like the whole thing is just blank slate, completely filled, filing exactly over that mark can be a little tricky. So you can check out my nut slot spacing foolproof method video where I go over how to do that. But the Cliff Notes version is you can, before filling the slot, you have the bass or the guitar strung up, measure between the previous string and the current string, like on the inside edges with digital calipers or dial calipers. Lock the calipers in that position. Now when you take the string out and you fill the slot, all you've got to do is hold the caliper jaws up against the previous string, and then the other jaw is going to act as a fence for your nut file. So that will keep that slot you're cutting in exactly the same position that it was before. Now keep in mind you do have to use one of the bottom-toothed nut files. You don't want teeth running up the side. So double-edged nut files and diamond files, don't do that because you're going to completely destroy the edge of your calipers. So you want to use the bottom-toothed nut files, like I use the ones from StewMac, just the regular gauged nut slotting files. Very smooth on the sides. They'll butt up against that caliper jaw and just glide right along it while they cut a slot exactly where you want it. So I highly recommend checking out that video as well, my nut slot foolproof spacing method video, which I have recently updated with some new stuff in the comments section. So be sure to check that out. And I think that's about it. So stay tuned for more guitar everything right here on Guitar MD. I kind of wanted to show my face, partially because I am getting like an influx of comments accusing me of using an AI voice, which I suppose is a compliment. If my voice sounds good enough to be an AI, that's pretty cool. So anyway, in the spirit of sounding like an AI, I will repeat myself one more time off camera. So stay tuned for more guitar everything right here on Guitar MD.